All right, welcome in. Thanks for joining. We're the Real Selection Committee. Our panel's grown just a little bit. I'm Mike. This is Gregg, and we got Will. We'd like to welcome him in. So we're getting closer and closer to the playoffs there. This next week's we're gonna see our first ever playoff uh, selection, or basically rankings here for Division One. So we're really curious on how this committee is going to place these teams, because now they got some other formats in there. You know, the 4 conference champions now get byes, and how are you going to play all these teams? How many teams are going to make it into these playoffs? So Tuesday, November 5th is when they come out with this list here. So this is we're going to try to get this in before them and see what we come up with. We're all going to have our own 12 teams, or we're all probably going to be close in that. So we'll get talking about that. Right now, we got the AP poll top 25 came out here. Think how this weekend went with all these games in here.
We had some really good games, some great games. We had a few upsets. A lot of things happened that maybe people weren't expecting. We had a couple conferences, in my opinion, extend the gap over a couple of other conferences. So in the Power Four, there's 2 that are up top and 2 that are down low, in my opinion. And we got the group of 5 team. In my opinion, one of them is clearly above everybody else at this point. So it's going to be a great finish. I mean, it's going to be awesome. Keep watching.
Right. How do you think with the first year with the playoffs? I mean, this is what we all wanted. I mean, how can you have college football and not have a playoff? Every other sport is a playoff to get to a champion. Now we have it.
Yeah, it's exciting. Obviously, us college football fans have been asking for it ever since the initial 4-team playoff. Obviously, you guys loved that initial 4-team playoff because of the victors that came out on top. But nonetheless, like he said, this last weekend was really exciting. We have Oregon creating some bad blood in the Big Ten with a late score to cover the spread against Michigan. You have an Iowa State team who is aspiring to be that undefeated Big 12 team. They get knocked off. They're not done because, again, in that 12-team playoff, obviously, one loss doesn't mean you're out. But, they got some work to do now. You have Texas A&M fall in big fashion. Seeing where that's going to impact their season. Obviously, still in the mix there for the SEC, but now they've got an uphill battle to climb. Clemson goes down. It was a fun weekend. A lot of things that are making this selection committee's decision and our decisions very, very tough.
That's good work.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, each week goes and happens. There's more things that happen. If you have a 1 loss this year, it doesn't really count you out. You can come back in and get in this 12-team playoff. So this is what's fun and exciting about this here. So let's just talk about the AP poll that came out. Right now, they got Oregon as 1, Georgia's 2, Ohio State's 3, Miami's 4, Texas 5, Penn State dropped to 6, Tennessee's 7, Indiana's 8, BYU's 9, Notre Dame's 10, Alabama's 11, Boise's 12, SMU's 13, LSU's 14, Texas A&M's 15, and we're going to stop right there. So my question is one of them is, how many teams is the SEC and the Big Ten going to send into this tournament? I mean, is there a cap on how many teams? You got to allow some of these other conferences to get in there. So,
Well, what we kind of figured at the beginning is they probably started out allowing 3 and 3. However, the way things are going, looks like both of them could get up to 4. One might get 4, one might get 3. The ACC looks like they're only going to get 1 the way things are going right now, although there's still things to be played out in that conference. And the Big 12, likewise. Obviously, they're going to give an independent, which looks like Notre Dame all the way to me. And the group of 5 would be Boise State. So we'll just have to see how – but there'll be probably, you figure, 8 votes between the Big Ten and the SEC. And then the other 4 will be distributed the rest of the way. The way the season's played out to this point. Now, there's a lot to be played out yet.
Still.
So nothing's determined.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Right.
It's going to be really interesting. Like he said, I mean, there's a very good chance that 8 of the 12 teams are from these two conferences.
Yeah.
You know, you got Ohio State obviously playing really well. Indiana's playing more than you could have ever expected them to play. I mean, I'm pretty sure their over/under for wins and losses was like 5.5.
Yeah.
They're 9-0. So, you know, doubling that, you know, with the season still remaining is pretty important. You've got, obviously, the SEC has a lot of powerhouse names up there, but they also have a lot of teams that have to play each other these last 3 weeks. You still have Ohio State and Indiana have to play each other. I think that's a bigger game for Indiana because Ohio State, I think, has a better chance of getting with 2 losses than Indiana does with 1.
Yes.
And then you got the implications of who's going to be in these conference championships.
Yeah.
Right.
Oregon's got a pretty easy schedule going. I think their toughest game is Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So they should go 12-0. You got Penn State, who should go 11-1.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're like Ohio State and Indiana, the implication on that game is you win, you get to play the conference championship.
Yes.
You lose, you're hoping
Could
the
be
committee's on your side. So there's
Yeah.
a lot of things that could happen that could really throw a wrench in the way things look right now with 3 weeks to go.
Unfortunately.
So with that being said, with the committee, right, how do you value a win or a loss? There's teams, you know, like Miami is undefeated and they're behind Georgia and Ohio State, have lost. Right now, they're in the ACC. That's a power conference.
Yeah.
Why are they not ahead of those teams? I mean, is this committee going to look at it that way, or are they going to say, "Hey, your one loss was to, you know, a good team"? So that do they rate that higher?
Well, Miami might be behind some teams, but if they win the ACC, they're going to get one of the top 4 seeds.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what they come out with, where a team is seated or ranked. It's what do you do in your conference?
Yeah.
So, you know, like Miami and BYU are going to be ranked probably lower down than probably several teams.
Yeah.
But they have the inside track to win their conference. So they will get the 3 and the 4 seed. That's the way that works. And then as far as what plays into it, a lot of the teams who you beat, how they end up plays into this.
You sure?
Teams that aren't even in the running for the playoffs, their winning helps you if you beat them. So that should play into it as well.
Yeah. And then obviously the big thing too is they're always going to take into consideration strength of schedule and strength of record. I mean, Miami, obviously undefeated. Their biggest win at this point is what? A road win against Florida.
Duke. Or,
But at the same time, if you watch the games, the defense hasn't looked all that great, specifically the secondary. You've got Cam Ward, who is arguably the Heisman frontrunner right now. And he's going to put up 40, 50 points a game. But in the playoffs, when you're playing a guy like Dylan Gabriel or a guy like Carson Beck, and your defense is giving up 31 to 40 to Dukes and Florida's, although I think they only gave up 17 to Florida, but nonetheless, you're playing these guys. It's a brand new ball game. So I think that's where, you know, you got Georgia edging them out because they just beat a team like Texas 30 to 15. You've got Oregon's obviously undefeated, and they've got that big win against Ohio State under their belt. Ohio State just took down Penn State in hostile territory in a big, big conference win. And it makes sense why these guys are ranked a spot ahead of Miami. But nonetheless, Miami obviously deserves to be up there in that conversation.
Absolutely.
Cam Ward can ball.
Right. So now let's step in and let's do the committee's job. Let's come up with, I think we all came up with our own 12 teams or whatever. So let's hear what we came up with. Greg, if you'd like to say what you came up with.
I got Oregon, number 1. I think that's without question. I got Georgia as the number 2. You know, after this past weekend with things that have happened, now that A&M's out of the way, LSU's out of the way, Georgia's clearly the best team in the SEC, puts them clearly at number 2. The number 3 would be Miami of Florida. They are clearly the best team in the ACC at this point. Number 4 seed is Brigham Young. They're clearly the best team in the Big 12. My number 5 is Ohio State. For reasons like we just discussed. Their only loss is to Oregon by 1. They just beat Penn State, and they've smashed everybody else on their schedule. So Texas is the number 6. They got beat up by Georgia, but other than that, they've looked good. My number 7 is Indiana. Team is undefeated, and they are just running through everybody. You can say their schedule's soft, but they are just mopping people. So I'm putting them at 7 for right now. Their game against Ohio State is going to say some things, huh, gentlemen? Notre Dame is my 8. Notre Dame had that one bad game, but since then, they have been lights out. They have been murdering people as well. So Notre Dame's the 8. Number 9 is Tennessee. Tennessee has some big games coming up. Number 10 is Penn State. The one loss to Ohio State, to me, doesn't hurt them that bad. They do have a favorable schedule to end up 11-1. See where that goes. Number 11, which is a shocker to me, somehow, some way, that doggone Alabama finds their way back into the playoffs. Huh?
Right.
But that's what they played well, other than the 2 losses. So you
Right.
got to give it up to them. And with what
Sure.
just happened, some of them teams that could have kept them out just fell.
Right.
And I got number 12 is Boise State.
Okay.
Because they are your group of 5,
Okay.
and they could move up from this.
Mhm.
This is just
Mhm.
for now. That's the 12 I got. There's probably 6 or 7 other teams that are right there. Very heavy SEC,
Yeah.
but we'll wait and see.
Right.
Keep an eye on SMU.
Yeah. So you have a list there, Will?
Yeah, if I'm going seeding based, I'll go seeding based too. Like if conference champions obviously be in the top 4. I think Oregon's the clear cut number 1 team in this country at this point.
Oh yeah.
They've got a solid defense. They've got a quarterback, albeit has been playing for 7 years. He can throw the football.
Yes, he can. Yes,
He
sure.
can sling it. Dylan Gabriel also in that talk of that Heisman conversation.
Sure.
This team's they're doing what they're supposed to do at week in and week out. Number 2, I would go Miami. I think Miami, like I said, their defense has had its moments, but at the end of the day, I think Miami's had less of a struggle through their 9 games than Georgia has. So I give them the edge in my rankings.
Yep.
Miami also, the clear front runner for the ACC.
Yep.
They go 12-0. They shouldn't have a problem in the conference championship. They're
Sure.
still at 13-0 going into this
Sure.
thing. At number 3, that's where I'd put Georgia. They're our front runner for the SEC right now after Texas A&M took a spill, which was crazy to think that Texas A&M was the front runner of the SEC.
They were
Through 8 weeks.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, Georgia, they're back in that top spot. Carson Beck's playing much better football since their loss against Alabama. He even had a great second half against Bama. That's when he really turned it on. After that first half, we've seen a different Carson Beck since then, in the first half of that Alabama game. I'm in the 4th spot, obviously. I'd go BYU. They're the best team in the Big 12 right now. The only undefeated left after Iowa State's mishap this past week where we saw a horrible hook and ladder attempt to try to keep the undefeated season alive.
Right.
5th spot, Ohio State. I think they're the best at-large team in the country right now.
Yeah.
I think that they're one of those teams that could beat every team in this country on their best day. I think if you and them and Oregon play again, it's you play 10 times, it's 5-5.
Yeah.
I think these 2 teams
Split. Yeah.
are the team to beat in this country right now. For 6th, that's where I'd also go with Texas. Texas obviously had a mishap with Georgia, a big loss, but other than that, they've killed just about everybody they've played.
Right.
Obviously, the Michigan win looking a little less good, but you still beat a team 31-12 in one of the most hostile places to play in this country.
In their home.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I would still put Texas there in that 6th spot. In the 7th spot, this is where I would go Indiana as well. You said it. I mean, the strength schedule's not there. Their biggest game is going to be Ohio State. That's the biggest test, but they're not just beating teams. They're giving it to every team they play. It seems like every time I check on the ESPN app, it's 56-10 or 63-7. They are putting it to these teams right now.
Yes.
Really good football. It's fun to watch when you get a team that's not usually up towards the top.
That's
playing
right.
like
Playing
this.
well.
Very much.
In the 8th spot, this is where I would put Tennessee. I think the Tennessee Notre Dame debate is a tough one, just because Tennessee has played that stronger strength of schedule. But Tennessee, their one loss is Arkansas, which isn't the best loss to have in the SEC. But Tennessee also has a couple of tests where you win those games, you're in the conversation not only getting to play Georgia in the SEC championship, but where are you at in the mix as far as top 5 goes.
Right.
And then I would put 9 Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame, they're an interesting team. Obviously, they can't ever be higher than the 5th seed, given not being in a conference. But this is a completely different football team than that Northern Illinois loss. Mark Freeman has lit a fire underneath these guys.
Yes,
you got Riley Leonard now top 10 in Heisman polling, playing a completely different style of football, being able to sling the ball. And they're just like Indiana. Since that Northern Illinois loss, the point differential is up there in most of those wins. So they're looking like a completely different football team. They're a top 12 team in this country for sure. After that is where I would put Penn State as well. I'd put them in 10. The reason I don't have them higher is because despite being where they're at, one loss to Ohio State, I don't think that offense has looked all that great all season. I think that defense has won them a lot of football games. But when you're getting into the college football playoffs, you got to put up some points to win some football games. 11th, I would actually go Boise State in the 11th spot. I think we talked about this a little bit before the show. Their only losses to the number 1 team in the country by 2 points in the zoo.
Right.
So
Right.
how do you not have them? Part of me wants to put them ahead of Penn State.
Sure.
And then 12th, pains me to say it, but yeah, I mean, you got to put Bama there. I think Jalen Milroe is probably a top 5 quarterback in the country. They've got a decent defense who's just had some bad games,
Right.
But for the most part, they come to play.
Right.
And they also have some tests coming up
Yeah.
that will show how good or how bad
Yeah.
this team is, and the DeBoer, is he the guy to
Right.
take up for Saban? If you can go 10-2, there's no doubt Alabama's going to be on with the schedule they've got coming up.
Absolutely.
Sure.
But if you lose one more, that's where you have the conversation.
They're hurting.
Bama missing the first 12-team playoff.
They're hurting with
Right.
that SEC conference right
Yeah.
now. I mean, you can't afford to lose another one.
Yeah. So I'll go over mine. Obviously, number one is clear cut, or Oregon's number one clear cut. Their remaining schedule's not very tough. They got Maryland, Wisconsin, Washington. It's going to be a walkthrough to win this. I have number 2 is Miami. The reason why I put Miami is they got an easy schedule. I looked ahead. I cheated a little bit. They got Georgia Tech. They got Wake Forest, and Syracuse might be a tough game for them, but they should handle business and get there. So I'm looking ahead at their schedules to get where these guys are placed. Georgia's my number 3. The scariest thing with them is they got a tough schedule. They got Ole Miss coming in this weekend.
Yeah.
The next week they got Tennessee. UMass is nobody. Georgia Tech is nobody. And then they got a conference champion. So there's a chance that they might not even be in the mix at number 3. So that's why I put them there. BYU's number 4. They got an easy schedule. They got Utah, Kansas, Arizona State, and Houston. I mean, that's pretty much that they should run these teams over, and they're going to get that bye. So that first team out of the byes, I'm going with Ohio State. They got a tough schedule. It looks now mid-tough. They got Purdue. They got Northwestern, Indiana, and Michigan's always a tough battle. I don't care how crappy they are. They could be 5-5 and still spoil your day.
Purdue's the type of team that always plays the Buckeyes tough.
Sure.
Yes, they do.
Sure.
Absolutely.
So number 6, this is where I jumped this team up. I'm going with Boise State, because if we're placing these teams based on, wins and losses, they got an easy schedule. While all these other big teams beat each other up and drop down, Boise State, if they run the table, they could still be up there and be high. So I'm going to put them at 6. They play Nevada, Jose State, Oregon State. I mean, they got an easy schedule. My number 7, I'm going to go with Texas. They are a very good football team. Their schedule, they got Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Texas A&M. That's going to be a big matchup at the end of the year. So we'll see how that plays out for them. Number 8, I'm going with Notre Dame, because they have an easy schedule down the stretch. And while everyone picks everyone off, they're going to jump up, jump up, jump up. They got Florida State, which is terrible. Yeah. Virginia, Army, that's a nice story. They're a great team. They're in the top 25. It'd be nice to see, how well they play against Notre Dame. That's a good measuring stick if they can make it into the top 12. Then they got USC. USC isn't as good as they had been or should be. Number 9, Indiana. Hey, they're scoring 40 points on any team that comes in and plays them. They're putting 40 points up on them. So they got a tough schedule coming down. They got Michigan this weekend, and they got Ohio State the next weekend. So that's a tough test right there. And if they go through those 2 games, man, they control their destiny. They're going to be doing pretty well. So my 10th team's Tennessee. Tennessee's still a good team. They got a couple tests down the road. They got Mississippi State. Georgia's their test right now coming up. They got UTEP and Vandy. Vandy's not a doormat in this league. We've already talked about them. They're better than they had been. Penn State's number 11. I agree with you that their offense is not explosive, but hey, defense is going to keep you in games. So if they can squeak out wins, they could be in the mix. They're still a good team. They only lost 1 game, and it's to Ohio State. So they're still good. They got Washington, Purdue, Minnesota, and Maryland. So their schedule's pretty winnable, right? So they could still be in the mix in case some of these other teams drop off. And my 12th team is Alabama. They're sneaking up in there, with all these other teams picking each other off. They're getting back in the mix. So they're my 12th team. They got a test this weekend going against LSU. Then the rest of the schedule don't look too hard. They got Mercer. Who's that? I don't even know. High school, I think, Oklahoma and Auburn. Teams that are on my edge that are looking in, I got SMU, because they got an easy schedule, right? They could walk into that championship game and win it and get it, and then get a bye. And then I got LSU as a team that's on the edge, looking at, hey, if they beat Alabama, man, that's putting them right back into the mix. Iowa State, they had a bad loss this weekend, but their schedule isn't too tough. I mean, they got Cincinnati and they got Kansas State, which might have something to say in this conference too. So those are some teams outside looking in. But, like I said, it's all going to be played out.
Yeah.
These teams are playing each other, and they're going to beat each other up, and they're going to keep moving around.
Right. Well, I got rounding out the group here that I think are teams that are still definitely alive. Like you said, SMU, Texas A&M, LSU, Ole Miss look pretty good. I think they jump back into the mix a little bit. You got Colorado, which could sneak into that Big 12 championship game, right?
Yeah.
Kansas State's still hanging out there. Iowa State's still hanging out there. They still technically have a chance, although they're kind of looking like they're puttering out a little bit. And we still got Army. I mean, Army still theoretically could get that group of 5 if Boise State were to happen to trip and stub their toe.
And they could get they could get that big win. And let's just say they beat Notre Dame. I don't think it's going to happen, but let's just say if they fumbled through that and won that, that would put them right into the mix.
Let's say they lose that game close.
Yeah.
And Boise State stubs their toe. Now what do you do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned. I'm glad some of those teams you mentioned, like SMU. I mean, SMU's in the ACC championship right now. It's Miami.
Yes, sir.
Their only loss is BYU,
18-15.
They just had a huge win.
Yeah.
An undefeated Pitt team, and you also look at the resume as well. I mean, SMU. They smoked a lot of the teams that they played, so that helps in a big way. They beat Louisville by a good substantial amount. Louisville back in the top 25. Louisville just took down Clemson in blowout fashion. So, the resumes are going to be really fun to look at this year because they run deeper. It's not just who's undefeated and who's the conference champion. It's who did you lose to?
Right. Who did you beat?
How much did you beat them by?
Right.
Yeah.
And the eye test is huge.
Yeah.
The eye test is huge this year. And that's why, when you talk about teams like Boise State, they've passed the eye test.
Yes,
Notre Dame, since that loss, they've passed it. Indiana, they're passing the eye test with flying colors right now, especially these last few weeks. So it's going to be really fun to see these last 3 weeks of football.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to even see how this committee comes up with this rankings and who they have in there. Do they look ahead or do they go with the past games, who they beat, like you said, strength of schedule to this point or schedule ahead? So it'll be interesting to see how they select these teams and where they put them.
Well, if you look at the 3 lists we come up with,
they're all different.
We didn't know what each other was going to write down. We had all the same teams, a little bit of different
order
positions, but that says something. I mean, we're all 3 pretty knowledgeable on the college football scene, and we got the same 12 teams there. And we got pretty much some of the same teams still left alive. Now, there are other teams that could sneak back in. We all know that. This is what I see. This is what we all see. I'm jacked up. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting.
A lot of fun.
So let's move ahead. I want to just quickly review what happened this weekend. This weekend was a great weekend. Let's just start with Friday's game. Boise State played San Diego State. Boise State deserves a lot of credit, and people should know this team because I think they will be in that playoffs. They smacked San Diego State 56-24. They got a Heisman candidate right there. That Gentry is amazing. Yeah. He's tearing up the Division I football right now.
Yeah, I love how they're comparing him to Michael Myers with the way he stands in the backfield. Yeah, that guy running at me.
Yeah, he looks phenomenal. So let's go with the Oregon played Michigan. They went into the big house and they smashed Michigan. That's saying something. I don't care how bad Michigan is. They get up for every game that they're in, and they're hard to beat in their house.
Wait, Michigan actually put up a decent fight. This game was a little bit closer. Oregon scored late to cover that, you know. Oregon was clearly better. I mean, I'm not trying to insinuate anything else.
Yeah.
But that game wasn't that bad. Michigan put up a good fight for the way the season's playing out for them. You know, and Oregon's tough. I mean, they look unstoppable.
I like the move by Oregon. You know, you're new to the conference. You were discussed as a potential winner of this conference in your first year. Why not go out and beat the last few years champions in style and you know, add a little more. You got to create these rivalries right now, don't you? And that's bad blood for Michigan. Wait till next season. It's going to be fun.
Yep.
Right. So I'll jump into at the beginning of the season, we thought Florida was going to be terrible. They got a tough schedule. They went and played Georgia. Georgia, they beat them 34-20. The game was much closer than this. 3/4 of the game, Florida, it was tied. Florida was in this game till then they finally got.
Florida was at the halftime.
Yeah, they finally got outran, But Georgia's clearly right now the better team in the SEC, but will they last? I mean, that conference is so tough to run that table.
One thing we discussed about Georgia and Alabama, it does seem like they have a hard time putting together full games.
Yeah.
I mean, they clearly play enough to beat teams. Mm-hmm. But, I see a lot of Georgia fans puffing their chest out saying no one can beat us. Well, for 3.5 quarters, Florida was right there.
Yeah.
Florida's not a team anybody's talking about doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
You did win 34-20, and we do have a lot of respect for Georgia. In no way, shape, or form do I want to make it out like we don't. Mm-hmm. But they are not head and shoulders above everybody else. This season is fun. It's great. A lot of games like that going on. You can't project nothing right now.
Right. So we'll go into another game. The biggest game of the week, I think, was Ohio State and Penn State. Wasn't a very high-scoring game, but Ohio State came out as victors in this game. It should have been a little wider margin for Ohio State. They had a couple mistakes and turnovers, and they could have held Penn State. This was actually the first game that Ohio State's defense looked like deserving of that top-tier ranking coming into the season as one of the best defenses in the league. They actually slowed down Penn State, and they only gave up 2 field goals. The other touchdown was an interception, was a pick six right at the beginning of the game, and after that, they only gave up 6 points. So that was a big statement for Ohio State, if you ask me.
For sure. I talked about Miami, their defense being a little fraudulent at times, and there's truly, I think, only like maybe 3 to 5 teams that the defense can have an impact in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. And Ohio State is one of them. I think if that defense is playing like they have, especially the last 2 weeks, I mean, that Nebraska game was horrid if you watched Ohio State on offense.
Yeah.
But that defense, it was a work of art.
Yeah.
So if you got the defense rolling like they are right now, and you got Indiana, you got to feel good where the defense is at with a team like Indiana coming up.
Yeah. Well, you're going to need it because Indiana is just smoking people.
Yeah, the quarterback over there is.
He's something else.
Yeah.
So here was an interesting game. Texas A&M went to South Carolina, and I thought coming in, Texas A&M had the right path to get to the championship game. I thought they were going to beat South Carolina, and wow, South Carolina beat them 44-20. Took it to them, smacked Texas A&M around.
I told you last week, a dangerous spot for Texas A&M coming off a big game. You don't really want to see South Carolina because over the years, South Carolina has been that team that just jumps out of nowhere and eats you up. Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's exactly what they did. I thought A&M would still win a close one, but boy, did South Carolina beat them up. And now the SEC's in chaos.
That reshuffled the SEC. That put Alabama back in the mix with that loss right there for Texas A&M.
And Ole Miss.
Yeah, and Ole Miss. So, all right, one more game was kind of a shocker that I thought Iowa State, they played Texas Tech. I thought Iowa State would go in there and beat them. I didn't think they would blow them out by any means, but they ended up losing 23-22. I mean, they can still scratch their way into the playoffs, but that was a bad loss for them.
Yeah, they're still sitting in that Big 12 championship spot as of right now, them and BYU. That's going to be fun to watch down the stretch because Colorado's got the same conference record as Iowa State, and Kansas State's 4-2. So, there's still really 4 teams that are in the mix and might be ranked 20th, but get the 4th seed.
That's true. And Texas Tech, I was a little higher on them 3 weeks ago, but then they lost a couple games in a row, and Iowa State's been kind of sputtering.
That's the beauty of college football. We took a look ahead at the schedules, and you got Alabama. They're playing Oklahoma. That's no pushover either.
No, it's not.
It's a road game in Norman, Oklahoma. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, anything.
Like you said with Ohio State, Michigan's having a horrendous season, especially after the last 3 years of success. And you're going to get Michigan's best because it's the game.
They'll be up for Ohio State.
That's the beauty of college football is all these teams. Penn State might have a cakewalk of a schedule, but all it takes is one team playing their perfect game.
The team that could dethrone Penn State is Minnesota.
Yeah, Minnesota's had a great game.
They're looking
Illinois.
really good. Yes, yes.
So we'll go one more game I think had a bit big impact on the ACC was number 18 Pittsburgh traveled to number 20 SMU, and this is now put SMU into the mix of being the second rated team in this conference, which, man, they blew them out 48-25. I thought it would be a closer game. I actually had Pitt winning that game, but wow, what a blowout.
SMU Miami could be really fun. That game might end like 70-63.
Oh, yes. You're right.
It's going to be an offensive onslaught. I mean, SMU just had their quarterback throw for over 300, the running back rush for over 150, and a tight end get over 100 yards receiving.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that's just offense is clicking on all cylinders right there. And, you know, we talked about Cam Ward and his firepower. SMU's got on the offensive side too. That could be a really fun ACC championship if it shapes out to be what it looks like right now.
That's good work. And I've said SMU over the last 2-3 years has been a winning program.
Yeah.
And they have come in and played top competition well.
Yeah.
And, you know, I thought SMU was going to beat Pitt, but not like that.
Right.
I mean, and Pitt had been proving me wrong. Every time I picked them, Pitt stuck it in, you know. But I finally got you. But, you know, SMU's a quality opponent. Like Will said, there's 4 teams still alive in the Big 12. We'll just have to keep an eye on them. You know?
Yeah. Right. So
that's the ACC. What am I talking
about? So those were our highlighted review of the games that happened this last weekend. So here's our fun part. We're going to go over and we're going to pick some of the next week games, give predictions, who we think's going to win, cover their lines and stuff like that. So the first game I got Texas at home playing Florida. Now this is a big spread here, 20.5 points. And Texas offense right now is 12th. They're averaging about 453 yards a game. They're 12th in scoring offense, 37 points a game. They're going up against Florida, which they're ranked 85th on yards a game, 355 yards, 63rd in scoring. So this is kind of a mismatch right here. So do you see them winning by 20 points?
You know, that game is a little scary by looking at that 20.5 spot. Florida, we don't know what they're going to come out. Are they going to come out and play like they did last week against Georgia?
Yeah, they hung.
Or are they going to play like the team everybody thought they were, which isn't very good? And Texas, that's a sneaky spot. I'm going to take Texas to win, and I'm going to say they cover as well. It just feels like that's a game Texas needs to come out and make a statement on.
Minus 20.5 is scary, but I agree. I think Texas is due for a statement win.
Right.
You know, 2 weeks ago they lost by 15 to Georgia. 2 weeks ago they had their struggle with Vanderbilt.
Right.
I think Texas is due to come out and show that they're this top 5 team, they're this SEC powerhouse, and they're right there in the mix. I think Florida has played their biggest games very well outside of Miami. You know, they had a 6-point overtime loss to Tennessee. They had the 14-point loss to Georgia a week ago, and they had that game actually in their favor at halftime. But I think Florida is due for a little bit of a slip up, and I think Texas is due to show what Quinn Ewers and that offense can do.
Right.
Yeah, like you guys said, I mean, them hanging in there with Georgia is kind of scary. Spotting Florida 20 points because Florida is a good team. They're not terrible like everybody thought they were coming into the year. It is in Texas, so I think, you know, they had a week to prepare for this game right here. They're rested up. I think they will cover that. I think 20 points is scary, but I'm going to go with Texas beating them by worse than that because they're one of the better scoring teams in the league. So another game coming up, I want to go with Michigan is going to Indiana. So, and it's 12.5 points is what Indiana has given Michigan.
Well, this game also is one of those games that, does that say 10.5 or 12.5?
12.5 points.
Indiana should beat Michigan badly. The trouble with this game is Michigan's been a team that's had Indiana's number. Can Indiana get past we got to come out. We got to, you know, if there's some, if they face something like against Michigan State where they fell behind 10-0, are they going to be able to recover against that team? I think Indiana wins the game, and I think they cover, even though I said all that other stuff, because I think Indiana's just that good.
I'm going to go Indiana wins but doesn't cover. I think this is going to be one score to maybe 10 points at most. I could see like a 31-21 type of game go down. I do think Indiana is running on high. I think there's a lot of horsepower in that offense. Michigan obviously not really playing for much except for bowl eligibility at this point,
Right.
Which is crazy to think after coming off a national championship season.
Yeah.
I guess the Harbaugh effect is showing for sure. But I think Michigan, in its roots, is still a good football team. I don't think their record shows. They had a bad game against Oregon and Texas, but these games where they're not playing top 5 competition, they've hung into most of them, if not won them. Right. And I think Indiana's still going to get that win because it just feels like that Cinderella story. I think Ohio State, Indiana is going to be the big one for them. But I don't know if they cover. I'm going to go with Michigan with the plus 12.5.
Yeah, this is a tough game, and you're right. I mean, here's the thing: Indiana is playing the one of the power teams in the conference, whether they're having a down year or not. It's still getting over that hump, right? So Indiana's third in scoring, right? They're putting up 42 points a game. That's interesting. Michigan's down towards the bottom at scoring. They're 105th, and that's pretty bad out of 124 teams, right? They're only scoring 21 points. I think Indiana is going to win the game, but I agree. I don't think they're going to cover. I think Michigan is still a team that you have to prove that you can beat, right? I mean, they're still Michigan, and I think that's going to be the shock and awe of this game right here with Indiana playing Michigan. So I'm going to go with Michigan hanging in there with them.
Sure, they're not going to quit.
Right. So another game I want to talk about, we got Georgia traveling to Ole Miss, and Georgia's favored in this game by 2.5 points. So how do you see this? This is a big game in the SEC right here.
This is an interesting game, to say the least. Ole Miss last week looked like they could beat anybody in the country. I mean, granted, Arkansas is not great, but Ole Miss ate them up. In studying Ole Miss, since they've got into the SEC portion, it seems like they play a great game, and then, this is an I think Georgia beats them. I think Georgia beats them pretty good. And 2.5, that's a pick 'em game.
That's a pick 'em score.
Georgia's going to beat them.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what I see.
For me, I'm going to take Ole Miss covers plus 2.5 because they win this football game. I think Jackson Dart's gonna make a name for himself in this game. He's always been that quarterback that his name because he's always had that hype surrounding him. Mm-hmm. I think Kiffin's due for that statement win with this program.
Sure.
And with everything on the line, Georgia can lose this game and still get in. Ole Miss has to win. I think Ole Miss is going to come fired up, and I think they win this football game.
Very possible.
That's a good pick. Yeah, so you're right. Ole Miss offense, they're number 3 in the country at offensive yards a game, 528 yards a game. They're 9th in the league scoring, 37 points a game. So they're a good team, and I think they will move the ball. Georgia hung in. I don't know if they're the powerful Georgia of the past 2 years. I think, man, I want to say I think Ole Miss is going to win this game as well. I think it's only 2.5. That's a pick 'em. Basically everybody out there thinks that they're up and down on us. Yeah. It's a 50-50 shot of either one of these teams to win. I think it's a statement game for Ole Miss. You're right, Jackson Dart is the probably leading Heisman candidate right now, other than Cam Ward. It's going to be a battle there, but I want to go with Ole Miss. So next game we're going to talk about is another big game in the SEC. We got Alabama traveling to LSU, Death Valley, and Alabama's favored in this game as well by 2.5 points. So it's another pick 'em game.
Well, this would be a good game. I mean, this is an eliminator in my mind for one of these two.
Oh yeah.
I'm taking Alabama to win this game. I think there's something about them. They want to make people angry and get in that tournament. I think Bama wins.
Right.
LSU's sitting at 3-1 in the conference. Bama's sitting at 3-2. So this is a more important game for Bama. Mm-hmm. Kalen DeBoer really can't afford another loss in his first season at Bama. Brian Kelly's playing in a big game as the head coach of this LSU football team. Give me Bama by 10+.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm gonna make it unanimous. I'm gonna go with Alabama. I was kind of thinking LSU was good, but then they let me down with the A&M beating them. I think this is gonna eliminate LSU out of the talk and keep Bama into this playoff format. I think Bama's going to win. So we'll go with the next game we got. I wanted to throw this in. Washington's traveling to Penn State here. Let's see if Penn State can rebound from this loss right here and see if what's the coach's name for Penn State?
Franklin.
Yeah, see if Franklin can hold his job here. Because if he loses this, man, these birds are really going to be one to give him a goodbye kiss. So it's 13.5 Penn State's giving Washington.
Let me just say this. Penn State fans, you got to get off of it. James Franklin's a good coach. Who do you think you're going to get if you fire him? Okay. Okay, he loses the big games. So does every other coach in the country, right? Would you rather lose to the Purdues and the Northwesterns? Come on, people. Okay, this game, getting back to it, Washington's been playing a lot better. Yeah. You know, they're a scary team, but they're coming east. 3 time zones east. Penn State will win this game. And I think Penn State will cover because that Ohio State game leaving a bad taste in their mouth. I think the players are going to try to get around their coach and help him keep his job. I'm taking Penn State to cover, but Washington is getting better. I mean, they've been playing better.
For me, Washington is an interesting team. They've had their best season in program history last year, probably. And now they're in the Big Ten, and it just felt like a move where it's like, I don't know if you will ever do anything else. I think we're going to see Penn State win in Big Ten football fashion. Washington lost a game a few weeks ago, 40-16 against Iowa, who I think has a pretty middle-of-the-road offense. So I think Penn State can get some confidence with Drew Aller in this game. I think they win, and I think they cover them like minus 13.5.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Penn State as well. Washington is playing better football these last couple weeks, hanging in there with some teams, but I think Penn State's clearly the better team, and they're going to cover that spread. They should beat them at least by 2 touchdowns, which covers that. So last game that we're going to go over, I got BYU. They're traveling to Utah. And surprisingly, this point spread is only 3.5 right now, which seems a little closer than what I would think BYU should be. They should be favored by more, I think.
Well, the reason it's close like that is a rivalry game.
Yes.
Okay, they're both from Utah.
Right. Exactly.
But Utah is all over the place. Yeah. I do not think Utah is very good at all this year. They're 4-4, and they've been playing a lot worse the last 3 games. Brigham Young should handle them. This is a game Utah's been getting the better of over the last few years, but Brigham Young's going to come out and put them to bed.
Right.
Brigham Young, cover.
For me, this is an interesting game because Utah was the favorite at the beginning of the year to win the Big 12. You've got a home game here. You're playing spoiler. I'm going Utah to win. They've lost 4 straight. 3 of those games being games they had no right losing. I think they get theirs. I think it's one of those games where, you know, it's a late 10-15 game. I think midnight rolls around, you realize you're still awake, and there's a good game going on. You turn it on. I think this one's going to come down to the wire. I could see the game-winning field goal as time expires being the difference in this game. So I like the line a lot. I think either way it goes, it's going to be a chippy game. I'm going Utah to play spoilers on BYU's good season.
Good.
Interesting. Very good. I agree. I think Utah is much better than their record reflects. They should hang in there, but I'm going to go with BYU winning this game. BYU is, I think, a better team for sure, and I think they get it done. They got bigger and better things to do here, so I'm going to go with BYU as well. So, well, I think that wraps up this week. I want to thank Will for coming on. Maybe we can get him to come back in the future. We had a great time, very knowledgeable. We really enjoyed it, and we'd like to hear from you guys. Please comment. Any of you guys suggest anything, just anything you want. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, give us feedback. That's how we can make the show better. We need to hear from you folks. Anything we can do to make it more listenable or more interesting, please comment, like, subscribe. We appreciate your time.
Yep, like and subscribe. We'll see you next week. Thanks for coming in. Bye.
Peace.